Alright, I was thinking about it, and this will probably be the last video that we need for continuous motion. And the only other thing we'll be doing in the next few videos, if you want to stick around, we'll be adding buttons that the user can actually use. So if you wanted to do this for like a display or a classroom demo or something, you don't want to have to exit out and actually change these things manually. You know, turn vectors toggle on and off by actually typing in true and false. That's a little tedious in the middle of a classroom setting, right? So we're going to add some buttons to the actual simulator that'll just do that while it's running. So we'll be able to make those changes. But in this video, the only thing that we have left to do before we add in those buttons is we're going to make those vectors, which is pretty straightforward. And we're also going to finally make it so that you can, if you want to, zoom in and out. So you can change the grid scale. So we're going to do both of those things in this video. Okay, so the vector lines. Well, we've already made a toggle for it, right? The vectors IO toggle. If it's false, we're not going to do anything, and if it's true, what do we want to have happen? Well, we also already have these lines in here that's going to run if manual motion is false, and in this case, this is only going to run when we're ready to draw that indicator, and if we're in horizontal motion, right? That's what the indicator color 1 means. So really we could come into this line here and say, let's see, we probably want it right after we append that indicator to the list. That way we'll draw it on top of that. Whatever we did when we drew the horizontal motion before, so when we pressed the H button, oh wait, we turned the stop motion vectors. I forgot we turned the stop motion vectors to true. So we're going to come up here and find that. Okay, so when stop motion vectors is true, this first line I believe was the horizontal line. So with our horizontal motion, this is really the only one we want to draw, that dark red line. So we're going to come back into this line right here. We're going to add in, we're going to bury an if statement within that other if statement. So if vector IO, or is it vectors IO? Is there an S in there or not? This is one of the joys of programming. I'm trying to remember what you called everything. There is an S in there. Okay. So if vectors IO is equal to true, then we want to draw that line. And I just pasted it in there. All right. And the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this if vectors IO equals true line. We're going to drop that underneath of that appended indicator. And in a moment we'll go ahead and grab that the one where we draw the yellow or the green line, because that's all we'll want with if it's just vertical motion. And finally we're going to add in one underneath the combined motion section, and in there we'll draw all three, because that's where we're going to want all three lines being drawn together. So this, I'm copying that green line for the vertical. And now I'm going to copy both of, actually, I don't know that it matters necessarily that we still check for a positive x val and y val, but just to be safe, I'm going to leave this extra if statement in there as well. So I'm going to copy that whole line section, and underneath of my combined motion, I'm going to paste those. I'm going to come back over just to make sure that it left my tabs right, and it didn't, right? So we're going to tab that in, and tab that in. Okay. It still looks a little off to me. No, we're good. Okay. So now if we have turned on our vectors, right up here with our little toggle, which right now we haven't, so it shouldn't run any of those. So if we press H, we just get the same that we've been seeing. We press V, we get the same thing that we've been seeing. And if we press C, we get the same thing. No changes there, because we left this to false. But if we set this to true, we should see some vector lines. And now you notice it's only drawing those vector lines when it draws the indicators, because it's buried underneath that if statement. Same thing if we press the V key, we should see some small little green lines indicating our vertical velocity at that moment, and they'll grow over time, as you can see. And if we press the C key, we should be getting all three of those lines. Okay, so again, pretty straightforward. Figuring it out is the hard part. Once you've got it figured out, a lot of times it's just using the code that you've already written and using it in a slightly new way. And so, let's make sure let's run this again. I want to make sure that we're actually drawing the time values for these things too. Okay, we are. So if you mouse over that, you do get the time value. 2 seconds, 4 seconds, etc. 7 seconds up here. I just want to make sure that was in fact working. I hadn't checked that yet. You always want to try and check everything you can think of to check. So now, how about zooming in? So far we've got that one grid that we've been using this entire time. It's right here, right? Let's set the grid to the right size, set the background image to this. Now we want it to be interchangeable. So let's come up to the top here and let's add in another variable. Let's call it pixel meter ratio. And let's set that to 1 for now. Okay, so right now, and we're doing that because right now that is our pixel to meter ratio, right? We're looking at a screen that's 960 pixels wide, and it represents a distance of 960 meters, right? Again, we're starting offset there, but you get the idea. So that's our ratio right now. It's 1. So let's, oops, I'm struggling here. Okay, let's say if pixel meter ratio is equal to 1, colon, we're gonna do that we've been doing, right? So we're gonna set it to the grid that we've been setting it to. If pixel meter ratio is equal to 10, we're going to set it to grid 2. And this is, I made those grids. I went into Photoshop and actually made them. So this other one sets the pixel to meter ratio to 10. So there's 960 pixels, and it's a 96 meter grid, right? So I've specifically made these. Now there's other ways to do this. If you wanted the user to be able to, I'm going to copy that and paste it again. We're going to go down to 100, and we're going to set it to grid 1. If you wanted the user to be able to like use a mouse wheel or something to scroll in and out to lots of different sizes, this wouldn't be the best way to do it. But since we're going to limit them to just 3 different zoom values for if they want a slower motion, they can zoom in and look at it closer. If they want a fast motion like we've been using, they can zoom out. We're only ever going to let them set it to these 3 values. They'll be able to set it to 1 or 10 or 100, and that's it. And so if we run this now, we get the same thing, right? But if we set this pixel meter ratio to 10, notice that the values on the top of our grid here have changed. It's no longer 0 to 800, now it's 0 to 80. We do have a problem that we need to fix though, because now when I press my horizontal motion, the ball moves at the same speed it's been moving at, but it doesn't, this isn't 100 meters anymore, it's only gone 10, and so my positions are off, my velocity reading is off, all that stuff. And let's go ahead and just, while we're here, let's check to make sure that if we type in 100, we zoom way in, right? So now we're at 0 to 8 meters and 0 to 6 meters on the way down. I don't know that that will ever be useful, but it's there as an option. So, and again, we would have, if we ran this, we would have, values that were wildly off by a scale of 100 because we've only gone 1 meter and it says we've gone 100. So, excuse me, we need to come in here and adjust. Okay, I'm going to need to apologize to anyone that's got this far because this next part's going to be a little tedious for you because I initially, when I made my own, when I started this, I knew that I was going to want to be able to zoom in and out. There was something from the start, I knew I wanted that functionality, so I built it in. When I did this tutorial series, I knew it wasn't pertinent to the physics. It seemed like an extra thing that you could or could not want, right? It doesn't really make or break anything. It's just kind of a neat little novelty. So I thought we would focus on the physics and the program of everything else first, and we would add it in later. It turns out if you want to do it that way, it's going to be pretty tedious because what we need to do is we need to go through and multiply or divide various things by this ratio to make sure that it still works if we zoom in or out, to make sure the ball motion is still going to work, and that we're drawing indicators appropriately, and that we're drawing lines appropriately. So I've gone through and I have fixed them in this script, and I'm just going to walk through and show you where I fixed them. I'm not going to go through why I am multiplying here and dividing there. I would definitely encourage you to sit down and think about why we're doing what we're doing in each one of those cases, but it would just make for a very long video that would ultimately doesn't add a lot to know why we're doing why we're scaling things the way that we are. Specifically, the concept just being that if we want to zoom in and out, we need to scale the visual motion on the screen. So so I'm going to quickly scroll through. It's all in the main loop. The stuff that we're scaling is all in the main loop, and so I'm going to try not to make sure I don't miss anything here. Let's see. I can tell I'm going to need to add stuff here, actually. I'm going to need to multiply by my ratio. I thought that I caught them all, but I can see that I didn't. Going to need them in both of these locations. Okay. So when I draw the lines, I am scaling the size that I'm drawing them by my pixel meter ratio. So you're going to need it there. You're going to need it in this line here. And then likewise, you're going to need to do that in both places in the line where you're drawing both directions. We will need to scale our labels so that they're they're reporting the correct thing. So you can see how I've scaled that there. Let's see. Again, kind of trying to go slow here, make sure we're not missing anything. We're doing the same thing with the vector lines in the case of the continuous motion for all three of them, so this one as well. And then likewise when we do the combined motion, we're doing all three, and in this case in both locations you can kind of see the edge of the y velocity there. We need to scale the x position of the ball, so you can see it in both of these locations. And then when we press our buttons down here, specifically our manual buttons, we need to scale the position with the new position we put it at to whatever our zoom value is there. And so you'll need that for the H. You'll need to do that for the Y. If you want this zoom in and out functionality. If you don't, you're not going to lose anything. You'll just stay with that large scale, and then you won't have to necessarily worry about all of this extra pixel meter ratio scaling that can make things a little bit tougher to kind of follow in the script. So totally optional, but if you do want it, that's how you'll do it. Just add in all the things that I showed you there, and you'll have your scaling, your in and out scaling. So that is the very simple, or the finished. You can see I've scaled it in here, and now we're getting the proper, because we're still at 50 meters per second horizontal, and so that moves very quickly. You can actually, since we're here, remember, so far with the horizontal velocity, we've hard-coded that, right? And if you want to be able to change that on the fly, because you put 50 here, you put 50 here, that's going to be a pain right now, right? We didn't soft code this, so if we want to change that to say 10 right now, we'll have to go through and change all that to 10. So the first thing we're going to do with our buttons script in the next one is we're going to change that so that we've got soft coded it. If you don't want to do the buttons, you still might consider soft coding that. So you can, if you want to, come up to the top and just change the one value, and you'll change your horizontal velocity. We're going to do it together in the next one. If you do want the buttons, I'll show you how I did that as well.